Athlon Sports polled coaches across the SEC to give evaluations and critiques of other SEC schools. So, what one anonymous SEC coach said about the LSU 2024 squad.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, your preferred podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you want to find us. We're on the SiriusXM app as well. You can find us there. You can also check us out on YouTube. So search Locked On LSU in that YouTube search bar. Hit the subscribe button, like the video, comment on the video, interact with the podcast. Always appreciate all of my everydayers for making us your first listen every single day. Want to get into what one anonymous SEC coach, not necessarily head coach, but just coach, said about LSU's 2024 squad, kind of an evaluation of Brian Kelly's tenure so far. We'll get into that. But first, I have to let you know that today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. So that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's get into it because Athlon Sports chatted with, assistant coaches and kept those assistant coaches' names anonymous and had those assistant coaches kind of evaluate where certain programs and teams are at in the SEC. This is from Athlon Sports, and you can find all of the, the breakdowns and this is, of course, this is one coach's opinion. This is one person's opinion. But whenever you're granted, and I'm going to butcher, I do it every time I butcher this word, anonymous, whenever you're anonymous, literally every single time, like that word is my Achilles heel. Whenever you're anonymous, you can let it fly. Like you can give your true and full and honest opinion about something because nobody's going to come back for you and say, oh, you're bitter. Oh, this coach is putting a target on his or her back. No, you can say, hey, you're going to be anonymous. Nobody's going to know who said what or that you said this. Let us know how you feel. So let's get into it. This is from Athlon Sports. What a rival SEC assistant coach said about the LSU Tigers going into this season. Quote, they've been sort of off schedule, you could say. They had the Heisman quarterback a little too soon because if you plug Jaden Daniels into this year 3 staff and roster, I think they could contend for a conference title and playoff seed. Side note, I would agree. This is the best assistant coach roster that Brian Kelly has had at LSU and maybe the best of his entire career. It's a bunch of killers in recruiting, guys who are veteran culture builders in the league. Joe Sloan is going to work out really nicely as the OC. The quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, isn't as talented as Daniels. Side note, not many people are, but he can manage the talent around him. They could still make the playoffs as an at-large this season if the defense gels the way that it looks. Blake Baker is a sharp guy. They could be brutal to play by the season's end. When I initially read the headline of SEC rival assistant coach critiques LSU, I was expecting, I'm like, all right, like get me ready for this. Let me stretch out. Let me see what somebody has to say critiquing this team. It didn't really sound like much of a critique. Honestly, it actually sounds like a lot of hype for this team. If your greatest critique is you had a Heisman Trophy quarterback a little bit too early, I guess that would breed a whole lot of optimism for this team, right? And it will be. And I really do hope that this never comes a day of what if, of what if the defense was just a little bit better on that 2023 squad. Like I hope that Brian Kelly does win a national championship or national championships at some point so we can kind of, move on from this narrative of the 2023 team could have contended for a national championship, but it set us up for national championship teams to come. It set up a consistent contender over the next few years. Like anytime you win a national championship, any of the other former questions just kind of dissipate. But I really hope that doesn't become the narrative of Brian Kelly's tenure as the LSU head coach, of a little too late or a little too early, or you had the right pieces here but not the right pieces there. I think this will be one of the great what ifs of, LSU football lore, is what if the defense wasn't butt cheeks, for lack of a better word, in 2023, of what could that team have been? Because that offense, that was 2019 offense. That was a duo of dynamo receivers, of two of the best in college football, the best duo in college football, a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, one of the best offensive lines in college football, solid run game. Like that way, obviously the run game looked different in 2019 versus 2023 because your run game was the quarterback, but still that was 2019 offense. Just imagine if the defense was a skosh better, how LSU could have had historic runs, and two of them in the matter of 5 years. That will, I think, be the greatest what if or one of the greatest what ifs of LSU football history. But if we're talking critiques, and your greatest critique is Heisman Trophy quarterback a little bit too early, but so much reason for optimism moving forward, then I think that I can live with that. And I think that's where a lot of the source of my encouragement and optimism comes from this team is revamped coaching staff, a quarterback that's been around the block, a quarterback that is, as close to a veteran as you can get for a quarterback that's never started in his career before. Obviously, I know the bowl game, but like not a consistent starter. So I think that at least evaluation of one coach's evaluation, one person's opinion, should breed a lot of optimism. But if we're going to talk about optimism and what success looks like for this 2024 squad, what are the greatest motivating factors for a successful 2024 season for LSU? We'll get into that after just a couple of words from our sponsors. All right, before we get into more Locked On LSU, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. So, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So, the radio station that I work for, we used LinkedIn Jobs when we were looking for a new producer. And to be honest with you, like, we're a radio station that we don't have a ton of money. We don't have a ton of people with a lot of time that can dedicate, to finding a new producer and to interviewing all these candidates and looking through all of the resumes. So that's why we went to LinkedIn Jobs, because it is so easy to find the perfect qualified candidate for the role with LinkedIn Jobs, because it's not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but could be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, then you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, so you can be one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Rolling along here, Locked On LSU, an anonymous SEC assistant coach said, "Hey, look, So this LSU squad, like this may be the best coaching staff that Brian Kelly has ever assembled in his career. Now, I don't consider myself an expert of that 2012 Notre Dame coaching staff. Like I don't know about like, his coaching staff at Grand Valley State, okay? And I frankly I'm not gonna go back that far and do the research for every single assistant coach on every single staff that Brian Kelly has had over the last 40 years. But I can say with absolute certainty that this is the best coaching staff that Brian Kelly has had at LSU. And that's saying a lot given that Mike Denbrock is not part of it. So, a lot of reason to be optimistic. But if we're going to talk about success for this team, and I think that success for this LSU team, a fair and reasonable barometer for success is getting into the 12-team playoff. And you might say, that's those expectations are too high. You might say, it's too much to ask for a quarterback starting for the first time. Welcome to LSU. Those are the expectations. When you get 12 teams invited to the playoff, you should be one of them. Especially preseason, most of the way too early preseason rankings, Athlon Sports, ESPN has LSU in the top 12. So like this isn't just something that I'm cooking up myself. Everybody else expects LSU to be a top 12 team. Now it's an SEC that's only getting more difficult because looking at Athlon Sports evaluations, they have LSU as the 11th ranked team in the country, sixth in the conference. What other conference in America can you say that you're about middle of the pack, but still a top 12 team in the country? Just absolutely insane how competitive the SEC is and is getting more competitive this upcoming season. But when we talk about success, just looking at this anonymous SEC assistant coach's evaluation of the team, it's very clear to me, has been and remains clear, and it's reiterated to me based off of this evaluation, the two most important factors. Let's start with one of them. It's the quarterback. Coach and quarterback are the two most important positions in football. In terms of coach, I think that we feel pretty, confident in what Brian Kelly is, but also what Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton and this duo of offensive coordinators is. Now, I've said and I will stand by it. I don't like co-OCs. I don't like that. I think that one person should have a job, another person should have a job, and you do your job. But Joe Sloan is the primary play caller, who's kind of been an apprentice to Mike Denbrock, who we saw what he's capable of in the bowl game. I don't know what Joe Sloan is going to turn out to be when he's calling every single game day in and day out. But the main reason why I have encouragement is the fact that he was under Mike Denbrock, and two, the fact that he knows Garrett Nussmeier, the fact that they've been together over the past couple of years. Just familiarity and knowing the strengths and weaknesses of a quarterback, I think that can be viewed as one of the biggest learning curves for an offensive coordinator and a young and new and maybe rather inexperienced quarterback. That at a certain point in fall camp, a new OC might just be, trial and erroring with a new quarterback, seeing what makes them tick, seeing, their habits and their tendencies. Well, Joe Sloan has already done that with Garrett Nussmeier. So you're already starting a couple steps ahead, maybe ahead of some other new quarterbacks and new offensive coordinators in this league. But it comes down to the quarterback. It comes down to exactly what can Garrett Nussmeier do? How far can Garrett Nussmeier carry you? Is Garrett Nussmeier one of those quarterbacks that elevates every single player around him? Joe Burrow did that. Joe Burrow elevated every single player around him in that 2019 offense. Joe Burrow continues to do that in the NFL. That is what makes an elite quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is the perfect example. You can put a bunch of scrubs around Patrick Mahomes and he can make them look like all pros because elevates the talent around him. Now, not very many quarterbacks can do that. So if Garrett Nussmeier is not that, that doesn't mean that he's a bad quarterback. It just means that, look, there's a certain level of elite that if you can't elevate everyone around you on a constant game to game basis, you're just not at that level, and that's fine. Is he the kind of quarterback that can elevate everyone around him when he needs to? Is he the kind of quarterback that is clutch in important moments? If you want to look at, the NFL side of things, I think those kind of quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that aren't the Joe Burrows and the Patrick Mahomes, but can elevate their game to a certain level when they need to. I think Jared Goff is a good example of that. And Jared Goff just got paid almost $50 million a year. That's incredibly valuable. That you're a really solid quarterback. You're going to avoid the fatal mistake. You can do what's asked of you. You can get the ball in the hands of your playmakers, and when you need to answer the bell, you can answer the bell. I think that that's a really fair expectation for what Garrett Nussmeier can be. Look, he's not going to be Jaden Daniels carrying the team every single week, averaging about 500 yards in the air and on the ground a game. But again, not very many quarterbacks can do that. That's why Jaden Daniels was the second overall pick in the draft, because he was so special and such a freak. Can Garrett Nussmeier do what he is asked to do and elevate his game in the most important moments? It's, 3rd and 4. You need to score. You need to get down into field goal range in the last 45 seconds of a game in order to go up and eventually win. Can Garrett Nussmeier do that? Can he orchestrate a series? Can he lead the team in a situation like that? We kind of saw that against Wisconsin, right? What was it, like 98 yards that LSU had to get down the field in order to score to keep themselves in the game? Or was it to keep themselves in the game, or was it to win? Whatever it was, he did it. Okay. And that was the moment when I was like, okay, this is no longer, itty bitty baby Garrett Nussmeier gunslinger that's just, throwing the ball around the yard and, still learning. Like, this is big boy. He's ready to take over this job. Can he be that? And then there's the other tier of quarterback that's elevated by everyone else around him. Not the quarterback that elevates everyone, but is elevated by the talent around him. I look at quarterbacks like Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, maybe that's selling Kirk Cousins short a little bit. Maybe Derek Carr, and I know all of you Saints fans are rolling your eyes. The kind of quarterbacks that if you have 2 Pro Bowl receivers and, a 1,500-yard running back next to him, you can win the Super Bowl. Like, you can win the Super Bowl with that kind of guy. Brad Johnson back in the day. But you you have to be great around the quarterback. Now, I do think that this LSU squad is great around the quarterback. You have an elite offensive line. I feel confident, very confident saying it's the best in the SEC. I think it's a top 5 unit going into in the country going into this season. You've got encouraging options at pass catcher, whether it's Chris Hilton, Kyron Lacey, or any of these newcomers, CJ Daniels, Avian Thomas, Aaron Anderson, if he takes that step forward, Shelton Sampson, if he takes that step forward. Like, you've got plenty of talent at wide receiver. You have Mason Taylor going into his 3rd season, ideally healthy. So I think you do have a lot of talent around the quarterback, but in order to be a national championship contender, or really rather in order to contend in this league, is having a quarterback that's elevated by the talent around him enough to truly be competitive in this league. I venture to guess not. Because there are enough proven entities in this league, whether it's Carson Beck or now Quinn Ewers or Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, guys that are established and have proven that they can elevate their game when they need to. If you're going toe to toe, and we're going to talk about the quarterback being the most important position in sports, and if you can't quite go to toe with some of these quarterbacks that we expect to be college football playoff caliber quarterbacks for their teams, then that begs a question. So, what kind of quarterback is Garrett Nussmeier? I feel confident about him. I think you can be just about as encouraged about Garrett Nussmeier as any new starting quarterback. But what exactly is he? Does he elevate, or is he elevated? I think he elevates. But I don't know. We'll see. I want to get into the other factor that is could dictate what LSU is, a college playoff contending team or not. And we'll get into that coming up next. All right, before we get into more Locked On LSU, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet all of it on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, that's $200 that you can use to bet everything from finals MVP to who is going to hit one out of the park. Now, there are so many things that you can bet on, that you can get in on the action with on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Look, I don't know if you've watched any of the NBA finals. Give me the Celtics. Give me the Celtics to win it all. Like, give me the Celtics everything. Give me the Celtics to win game 3. Give me the Celtics to win it all. And right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, the Celtics are minus 950 to win the series. So not great value there, but you can check out several other prop bets that they have on FanDuel Sportsbook app. For example, Luka Doncic to score 30 plus points in every game of the series at plus 160. Now, I'm going to take the Celtics to win this series, but Luka is inevitable, especially in the postseason. Unfortunately, Luka's just not getting very much help from the rest of the roster. So, hey, that's one thing that you can place your money on. Some of my thoughts, some of my takes, but do it however you want to do it. Just do it with the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Visit fanduel.com/locked on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Again, you can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU. So the two most important factors, I think, for this LSU squad, obviously the quarterback, what Garrett Nussmeier becomes, how quickly things click for him. Because I think it's fair to say that the quarterback that Garrett Nussmeier is going to be week 10, week 11, is going to be different than the quarterback week 1, knock on wood, keeping our fingers crossed that he's able to stay healthy, because he learns, he grows. This is his first season as the guy, as the starter. It's fair to say that you learn, you grow, you figure things out. The coaches learn things about him, certain things that you just simply cannot learn on the practice field, or things you can't learn not in a game setting. The second thing is, I think the most obvious, maybe, perhaps, and that's the defense. That's the defense. That's how quickly can this defensive coaching staff turn things around, and how much talent does this defensive coaching staff have to work with? You've heard me banging on the table about defensive tackle. There's not enough proven commodities at defensive tackle. I don't know what this defensive tackle room is, frankly. Could have a couple of young guys, young inexperienced guys that really take a massive step forward under the tutelage of Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples. Or it's a lot of a learning curve that costs you a couple of games early in the season, and then by the time they figure it out, it's too late, and you can't salvage your season. I don't know. The secondary. Some of these young pieces in the secondary, whether it's Ashton Stamps, Javen Toviano, many of these young corners, young and inexperienced corners, can Corey Davis coach them up? He's Corey Davis. Corey Raymond. Got NFL on the brain. Corey Raymond. Can he coach them up? Have they made that, kind of second year, third year step forward to be able to be SEC caliber corners, SEC caliber DBs? That's not what they were last year. So the major questions that I have: is there enough talent for this coaching staff to work with? Because they're not magicians, they're coaches. These coaches, this coaching staff, which an SEC anonymous assistant coach said is probably the best Brian Kelly's ever had in his career, they will be able to get as much talent out of these players as possible. But what's the ceiling? They can get you to your ceiling. But if your ceiling is average compared to the rest of the SEC, well, then it doesn't matter if you're at your ceiling, because you're not going to be good enough. But if your ceiling's up here, if you're watching on the YouTube page, like arms going through the ceiling. If your ceiling's up there, well, that's a different story. I just don't know what the ceilings are. So the first question is there enough talent for this coaching staff to work with? And two, it's how quickly can this coaching staff coach this team up? How quickly can they turn things around? Because if you watched a single down of that defense last season, you would know that it's back to basics time. that it is all right. Let's relearn how to tackle. Let's relearn everything. Let's go back to the basics. Will this coaching staff have enough time to turn this defense around to be ready to compete against USC game 1 in Vegas? That's what I don't know. I'm optimistic because I'm optimistic about this coaching staff, but I also have a fair and I think reasonable sense of pessimism, just given how bad the defense was last year and how much talent you really truly did lose, at least up front. And then the Harold Perkins side of this comes in as well. So it's the quarterback and it's the defense. If Garrett Nussmeier is the kind of quarterback that takes care of the football, can move the ball downfield, gets the ball in the hand of playmakers, and those playmakers make plays. And if this defense is top 40, you're looking at a college football playoff team. But those are all ifs. And those are a lot of things that have to go right. If one of those things doesn't happen, if the defense can't take those steps forward this year, then I think that you're maybe looking at an at best 8-4 football team because you don't have a Heisman Trophy winning Jaden Daniels quarterback to undo all the wrongdoings of this defense. But look, I think that college football playoff is a fair expectation and frankly should be the expectation. That's going to do it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow with a full breakdown of the FPI, ESPN FPI. What does that mean? Where is LSU ranking? How is that a fair evaluation for what this team can be? And of course, a ton of recruiting news. We'll get into some recruiting news throughout the rest of the week here on Locked On LSU.